decisions within the Department of Energy or within NNSA. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the men and women of NNSA are an exceptional organization, I think, actually in human history. And they will be essential to accomplish the scope of the task that's been outlined by this committee, the resources that have been entrusted over the last decade of a real rebuilding of it. And I can assure you that I will advocate for the men and women of NNSA that we can accomplish that mission together.
Well, I hope you do, because if you lose 500 personnel, you'll be sitting up at night, not just worrying, but also watching our weapons. Mr. Hansel, you as the USD INS are responsible for carrying out Section 714 of Title 10, which authorizes the Secretary of Defense to provide protection and personal security in the United States to designated individuals who are under a serious and credible threat to their safety. The most recent annual threat assessment of the U.S. intelligence community in March of this year stated, Iran seeks to target former and current U.S. officials it believes were involved in the killing of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani in January 2020, and previously has tried to conduct lethal operations in the United States. There are two former defense officials, Secretary Esper and Joint Chiefs of Staff General Milley, who have had their protection removed. Do you believe that decisions related to whether or not this protection should be based on the assessment of the threat by the intelligence community?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'm very aware of the specific 714 language, and specifically its new ability for the Secretary to delegate this responsibility to the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Security versus the prior restriction to the Deputy Secretary. And I'm very familiar with the regulation, and that there's two categories. One, that folks that get can receive this benefit because of the nature of the position, and second is a population mostly DoD and DoD retired that is based on circumstances. One of those being serious, credible threats, the other being overwhelming operational circumstances, and that the law says that determination shall be made based on a threat assessment. So to answer your question specifically, the law is clear that a threat assessment should inform that, and I'm also aware of the congressional notification requirements in that law, and if confirmed, would intend to follow it as written, and I think additionally make an overall assessment of the program to ensure we have a sustainable sustainable framework that allows us to mitigate risk to force in a standardized way.
So your view is that the threat assessment should be the predicate for removing or providing protection. Can Congress get the copy of the threat assessment that was used in the decision to take away this protection?
Senator, I have no information about historical, I'm not in the department now, about historical decisions, but if confirmed and if delegated this responsibility, I would have access to those threat assessments, and in accordance with regulations would share those.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for all putting yourselves forward to serve your country. We deeply appreciate that. The National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, designs, builds, stores, and disposes of our nation's nuclear weapons. Our stockpile remains safe, secure, effective, and credible thanks to the hard work done every single day by NNSA and our national security laboratories. Mr. Williams, I appreciate our earlier conversations and agree that NNSA faces immense challenges. After the end of the Cold War, NNSA infrastructure recapitalization efforts were abandoned, and now we must modernize most of the enterprise without interrupting the production of new nuclear weapons. Many of these facilities are truly one of a kind and must be custom designed and built to safely process plutonium, uranium, tritium, lithium, and high explosives. Fortunately, we are not starting from a blank state. The NNSA has produced an enterprise blueprint that shows all the facilities that need to be built over the next 25 years and then sequences them in priority, linking them to a new warhead production effort. We also have an opportunity as we build new infrastructure to replace old facilities, some of which date back to the Manhattan Project, to incorporate modern manufacturing processes. We can produce nuclear weapons faster, more efficiently, and reduce risk in that process. Mr. Williams, if confirmed, how would you approach the challenges of recapitalizing NNSA's infrastructure?
Well, Senator Fisher, thank you for that question. And that is the key question. I think as I have studied the problem and read the stockpile reports and read the blueprint enterprise that you mentioned, as well as the GAO reports, CRS reports, I think the scope and scale is as you describe. We have to deliver the program of record, the lifetime extensions of our existing stockpile, as well as rebuild the infrastructure to modernize. A lot of that comes, I think, through reassessing our relationship with risk, reevaluating the risk that we take. I think we have to make sure we have the workforce, that we retain the workforce that we have. As I mentioned, it's not just weapons scientists, it's machinists, it's technicians, it's every level of the organization that is needed to keep the very special qualities and skills that we have acquired that we can't afford to lose. And then I think, it will require leadership, focus on the mission. I think one of the things that drives all of us, it certainly drove the Manhattan Project, is understanding the current threat. I think that it's very sobering and awakening for all of us to suddenly be talking about strategic deterrence, talking about threats that we thought perhaps as a nation had gone away 30 years ago. And of course, the men and women of the NNSA never believed that, nor the combat commanders of STRATCOM. So I think there's a focus of the mission and leadership. I think there's innovation, and I think it's focused on the workforce, as well as keeping Congress informed that you'll continue to support this mission.
I hope, if confirmed, that you will look at that leadership, look at the workforce, be able to look at some of the complex construction projects that are out there and figure out how to improve the management of those as well. Mr. Williams, there are 7 life extension programs and major altercations currently underway. These nuclear weapons must be delivered on schedule, and several are synced to new delivery systems that are currently under development by the Department of Defense. So maintaining that close connection between the NNSA and the Department of Defense on these programs, that is key to the success for all the programs that are involved here. If confirmed, how will you ensure that NNSA fully understands the Department of Defense's requirements for these?
Senator Fisher, thank you for that question. Of course, I'll be participating in the Nuclear Weapons Council. I would like to come out to STRATCOM, meet with the leaders, General Cotton and the leaders of STRATCOM. They are the most important customer of NNSA. If confirmed, I would very much like to hear their input and have a very transparent conversation with them. There are a great number of details and classified information that I've not been privy to that I look forward to immersing myself in to make sure I understand all the details of delivering what frankly what our strategic forces require to deter our enemies. So very committed to work with you and with this committee to make sure I'm following through on all of those should I be confirmed.
And your role in that Nuclear Weapons Council is important in that process if you are confirmed. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Senator Fisher. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Welcome to all of our nominees. I asked the following 2 initial questions of all nominees before any of my committees to ensure the fitness to serve. So we'll start with Mr. Matthews and we'll go right down the line. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature? Please, down the line.
No.
No.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No.
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 For Mr. Marks, several military training areas very critical to Indo-PACOM. These land leases in Hawaii are set to expire in 2029, right around the corner. These leases, as I mentioned, are critical to ensuring U.S. and allied military forces can adequately train in the Pacific. However, the lands involved also hold cultural significance to the Native Hawaiian community. If confirmed, will you ensure that these negotiations, which will expire, is conducted in a manner that respects local communities and the environment while still prioritizing military readiness?
Senator, thank you for that question. I know this is critically important to you. And yes, Senator, if confirmed, I will work not only with the military services, but the local community. Hawaii plays a very strategic role for Indo-PACOM. And I would want to ensure that both the respect of the communities as well as the incredible importance of those training areas is recognized and we find the best possible solution.
And in fact, the DoD has recognized the importance of these negotiations, and there is a person named Noah Kalipi who is charged with making sure that these negotiations include the voices of the community. So it's good that you are aware, or that you will be aware of the necessity of how we're going about things. And I would also note that it is very important to the community that these negotiations occur as transparently as possible so that the community feels as though the military is acting in good faith and listening to their voices. Again, for you, the DoD stakeholders are closely coordinating with the EPA, Hawaii state agencies, and the public to complete the closure of the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. And you probably are aware that the spills that occurred at the Red Hill facility resulted in some 93,000 people being impacted. They had to go to hotels and find other arrangements. This led to a questioning by the community of how the Navy basically, but to the community, the Navy, it's all the military, was conducting it itself. So will you commit to overseeing the safe, timely closure of Red Hill, which will require taking a transparent role with the public to restore the confidence and the trust of the community in the military?
Senator, thank you. The transparency is vital to partnership. Good partnership is built on trust and good relationships. And so, Senator, if confirmed, I will commit to work not only with the Navy as this moves forward to ensure we're taking the proper steps for both mission capability and what is in the best interest of the community.
And the closing of Red Hill is not over, in that there are remediation and environmental issues that still must be addressed. And I would ask that you address them in a timely manner with the resources that will be required.
Yes, Senator, absolutely. And in fact, it was just a couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of meeting with the Hawaii Coordination Cell so that they could begin to get me up to speed so that I could understand the issue more thoroughly, and I do appreciate it more deeply.
I also want to mention that our military bases, our installations, I should say, are in various states of disrepair, frankly, and especially in Hawaii, which have aging facilities, energy vulnerabilities, and poor infrastructure. And so I'm putting into the NDAA a requirement that all of our services put together a 30-year infrastructure improvement plan so that we have something going forward that will more properly ensure that our infrastructure needs are being addressed and met. So would you support such a planning process for our services?
Senator, as a strategist, I believe in long-term planning, and so I appreciate the initiative that you've introduced, and if confirmed, would want to work not only with you, this committee, but the services on a way to achieve how we get a greater future look at the investments on our infrastructure.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask one question of Mr. Matthews?
Oh, sure.
This won't take long. So I'm glad that you testified that you will follow the rule of law and that the independence of the JAG officers, that's very important. Do you have any concerns about the fact that the military services senior JAG attorneys were fired?
Good morning, Senator Hirono. Thank you for the question. Not being in the department, I wasn't privy to the reason for the decision of Secretary Nextep to request nominations for the Judge Advocate General. I will say that from my understanding, the Navy TJAG had resigned before the beginning of the administration. So I don't believe it was actually said he was fired. I think the Secretary requested nominations for the Army and the Air Force Judge Advocate General. I think he acted according to law when he did so. So I would say that I share your concern about the independent the independence of legal advice.
So
Senator
you
Hirono,
can
perhaps-
imagine we have some concerns about what happened because no reasons were given. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Perhaps you can follow up also on the record, Senator Hirono. Thank you very much. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all the nominees and their families. By the way, it's a really, really impressive group of nominees, all veterans, all have served in incredible capacities, Purple Heart recipients. This is very impressive. So thank you to all of you. I'm not going to quiz you on the great Billy Mitchell, father of the U.S. Air Force, who said that Alaska was the most strategic place in the world. I know you already know all that. I just want from each nominee your commitment to come to Alaska, to me, to see this strategic place and see our wonderful military forces there. Can I get each of you to commit to that, starting with you, Mr. Matthews?
If confirmed, Senator, it's my first trip.
Excellent. Well, that's a great answer. Can anyone else top that?
That doesn't have to be the answer.
That's a great answer. Maybe you can come before you're confirmed. No, I'm kidding.
Senator,
Good answer.
Senator, as I testified to you 5 years ago about the increased importance in economic and national security of the area, I think that trend will continue, and thus appropriately, I look forward to visiting.
Great. Thank you.
Senator, I'd be honored. Would likely be in July or August with my fishing.
No, you're coming in February where it's 40 below zero.
So long as we can visit ADAC, I've always heard about it. in the
Okay,
Navy.
well, I'm getting to ADAC here in a minute.
And Senator,
Marks.
as we discussed, as goes Alaska, so goes defense of the homeland. It'd be an honor to visit Alaska.
Great, thank you. And again, I really appreciate all the great opening statements. Mr. Matthews, your statement and your family's service, just remarkable. It's super impressive. I'm glad so many of your family members are there. You and I had a good discussion. You're a very smart lawyer. You have a great background. Just to be clear, as we discussed, your loyalty, of course, in this job is to the Constitution, correct?
Yes, sir, to the Constitution and laws of the United States.
Good, perfect. And you've been doing that your whole career, loyalty to the Constitution and the United States?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Let me go to you, Mr. Matthews and Mr. Marks. I want to talk just briefly about the 8A contracting program that we talked about in my office. I was recently in the great state of Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. There's a lot of 8A contractors there. You know, this is a program that's been in law for decades. It helps economically disadvantaged communities, but where I don't think it gets a lot of press is just how effective, efficient. I mean, our military, our Pentagon needs effective, efficient ability to deliver services. These companies in Huntsville, I saw a company, it was Alaska Native company that took the request for a armored wheeled vehicle, a Navy Harpoon anti-ship system, to combine them together. They did it in 2 weeks, the design. Then they had manufacturing done where this new system was out on the beaches of Taiwan in less than a year. And the government gets to keep the IP, all done in Huntsville, Alabama. It was unbelievable. The OEMs, the big primes, it would take them 10 years to do something like that. So, Mr. Matthews and Mr. Marks, can I get your commitment to work with this committee? You know, there's some people out there, oh, these are DEIs. This has nothing to do with DEI. This is efficient, effective, good for the Pentagon work. And I just want to make sure you guys agree with me on that. Can I get your commitments on that?
Senator, you have my firm commitment. I think we should not paint with a broad brush. Alaska Native corporations particularly have played a unique role in support of the national defense, and we can't ignore that.
And made it much more effective and efficient and deadly, correct?
Exactly, sir.
Mr. Marks?
And Senator, if confirmed, you have my commitment. Anything that can get capability into the hands of the warfighter more quickly that helps us defend our nation is of vital importance, and we should support that.
Great. Let me very quickly talk about ADAC. The Indo-PACOM commander, NORTHCOM commander, CNO of the Navy have all recently testified either in classified or unclassified hearings saying, look, you look at a map, you look at the Russians and the Chinese, how aggressive they're being in the North Pacific, in the Arctic. We need to reopen that base. There was a Navy team that was there just last week. And can I get your commitment to work with me on that and looking at that really, really critical base that used to be a sub base? Senator Hirono was talking about Red Hill. ADAC has one of the largest fuel storage depots anywhere on the planet Earth. It's all infrastructure. It's still ready, available. Can I get your commitment to work with me on that?
And yes, Senator, you have my commitment if confirmed.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all the nominees. I want to echo Senator Sullivan's comments. Extraordinarily well qualified, and the work you have done to serve this country prior to this day is exceptional. I want to express my appreciation and recognition of that. I also want to have to go back to our wonderful chairman, John McCain, and remind the senator that Billy Mitchell was court-martialed, but that's another story.
But I think he got his rank back after that, but he was.
This is something that's been going on for 10 years in this committee.
Turns out he knew what he was talking about.
He did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Williams, I know Senator Reed raised this question, but I'm gravely concerned about this memo that was mentioned on Friday of the possibility of 500 people in the NNSA as non-essential. That's 20% of the workforce. And the testimony was it's one of the greatest scientific and engineering organizations in human history. I just don't understand how that wonderful organization, that's true, 20% are non-essential. By the way, I did a little calculation. That's 0.2% of the NSA budget is those 500 people. So what's to be gained by reducing the staff by 20% of this essential agency in this moment of the rebuilding of our nuclear triad?
Senator King, thank you for that question and for your attention on the workforce, which I think is absolutely critical. If confirmed, I commit to you that I will stand up for the men and women of NNSA, that we are, that I will advocate for them. We're facing a moment in history where NNSA must perform. And I think there's opportunities for us to innovate at NNSA, to deliver on the program of record and the expectations that this committee has set, and that will stand up to our adversaries.
You're absolutely right. This is a no-fail mission. And in fact, because of the modernization program that we're in the midst of, the demands on NSA have never been greater, probably since the founding of the agency. So I hope you will stand up for that workforce. And by the way, there's an issue here not only of the people, 500 people being said they're non-essential. The effect on morale in the workforce, I think, is something to be considered. So I hope you can address this early in your tenure and be sure that the workforce is protected and that the morale and the esprit of the agency can be maintained. Will you commit to that?
Mr. King, if confirmed, I will certainly commit to that. I will tell you that my commitment to this deterrence really did begin in Tiananmen Square in May of 1989, and an observation of the student protest there. I was in the Pacific on a nuclear submarine during the third crisis of the Taiwan Strait, when the Communist Chinese first launched missiles in the modern age that dropped short and flew over Taiwan in a show of force. In the aftermath of that, as I recall, we sailed a carrier battle group through the Strait of Formosa to show our resolve, and that we can't do that today, and that concerns me. This program's of historic importance.
I couldn't agree more. Mr. Hansel, I always ask intelligent officials the same question. Will you tell the president the truth, even if it's something he doesn't want to hear?
Absolutely, I would do so, and I think the president and the secretary would require me to do so.
The former DNI, Dan Coates, put it very succinctly. He said, the job of the intelligence community is to find the truth and tell the truth. And just parenthetically, who started the war in Ukraine?
Senator, it's a military fact that Russia invaded Ukraine both in 2014 and 2022, as recently outlined in the unclassified ATA.
Thank you.
Annual threat assessment.
You just earned my vote. Thank you, sir. Mr. Williams, I'm going to overlook the Harvard Law School experience. I think several other senators on this committee labor under that disability. Can you recall an occasion in all of your career as a lawyer for the military when you said no to an officer an order that they wanted to pursue that you told them was contrary to the Constitution or the laws of this country?
Senator, I typically try to avoid that situation by providing advice in advance, but I can recall experiences where there were violations of the law of armed conflict, which I had to point out. When I was in Afghanistan one year, we had a platoon leader who had some detainees, and he was making them walk in front of the formation across IED infected land. It was a violation of law of armed conflict. It's not how we do it. We separate our prisoners and speed them to the rear. So that was something I had to point out.
And you made it clear and reversed the.
There was an investigation.
Process.
Just correct, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and your willingness to serve. Mr. Marks, I want to talk a little bit about an issue that affects many of our installations across the country, including my home state, Redstone Arsenal and Huntsville. The issue is military construction, better known as MILCON. We need to move fast, and traditional military construction process is way, way too slow. You know, back at Redstone Arsenal, there are two warehouses as we speak that are going up. One, Military Corps Engineers is building, and the other is by the FBI. These warehouses are roughly the same size, but the FBI facility has a lot more bells and whistles. Yet the military warehouse is going to take double the amount of time to build and 150% over the cost of what it's costing the FBI building. How on earth does this make sense? It is a disaster, and I'm sure we're having those problems across the country. Can I get your commitment to go and look at this situation? Lieutenant General Chris Mohan of the AMC commander down there is really looking into this, and I think he could help us with some of this in the future. We need to cut back on the time and the cost of a lot of these buildings, Mr. Marks.
Senator, thank you for that question, and I couldn't agree more. We absolutely need to look at additional best practices on ways to speed up our MILCON to include how it aligns with our programs. And so if confirmed, I absolutely would want to dig deeper with you on this to ensure that I see how we can potentially go faster.
Thank you. And another quick question for you, Mr. Marks. You recently discussed drone incursions with my staff. Can you tell the committee about that conversation and your experience?
Senator, thank you. What we have seen across the country, and especially there at Eglin, is an increase in drone activity and, in fact, activities surrounding our installations, whether that is foreign national turnarounds or other investments, things that we need to make. And so, Senator, in the local area at the installation I currently serve at, we've increased our investment to increased detection capability so that we can then use the authorities that we have been provided at the installation level to defend those installations. And Senator, if confirmed, I would want to see that expanded so that we can work with the combatant commanders to ensure we are defending our local installations here in the homeland.
Thank you very much needed. Mr. Hansel, as you know, one of the organizations you will oversee is USDINS, if you are confirmed, is the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, MISIC, which is a component of the Department of Intelligence Agency. It's located in Huntsville, Alabama. MISIC provides world-class analysis and performance of foreign weapons systems. Mr. Hansel, can you talk a little bit about how important it is for our warfighters to assess the kind of foreign material data that the DIA and MISIC provide?
Yes, Senator. I'd first highlight the importance of MISIC as the important relative to the growing importance of the space domain. It becomes ever more critical to our national security, as well as I think critical intel from MISIC should be used to inform the Golden Dome architecture design at every stage of the milestone.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, NNSA has been plagued by cost overruns, schedule delays, project cancellations related to construction of nuclear facilities, including uranium processing facility, the Savannah River plutonium processing facility, and others. If confirmed, what specific steps would you take to ensure that these project management failures are not repeated in the future?
Thank you, Senator. And that is right at the heart to the plutonium pit production that you mentioned in Savannah River as well in Los Alamos, is the critical path to restoring our ability to make new nuclear weapons and to ensure the long life extension of our existing stockpile. There's a number of details, a number of classified details that I've not been briefed on in that, but that is, I commit to you, should I be confirmed, that is absolutely a commitment to get that back and to deliver, for the weapons programs.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews, if confirmed, what role would you have in advising the President and the Secretary on reforming the JAG Corps?
Whoa.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. If confirmed, I would be a legal advisor to the Secretary of Defense and not to the President unless he asked me. But if the President were to ask me, I would consider what the question he asked, and in light of the facts and information available to me, I would make a recommendation. The JAG Corps, the Army Judge Advocate General Corps, the Joint Force JAGs play an important role in ensuring the delivery of military justice, ensuring compliance with the law of armed conflict, and a whole myriad of activities. And so it's important that we get it right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Mr. Marks, are you going to visit Huntsville before or after you visit Alaska? Just take that for the record. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of our nominees. So after a 2018 Reuters investigation found that military families were living in homes that were filled with mold, pest infestations, and other safety hazards, this committee opened an inquiry and instituted a slate of reforms in 2019 to hold private military housing contractors accountable. One of these reforms was the creation of a tenant bill of rights to ensure that military families have the quality housing that they deserve. Another was the creation of a public database for military families to report when their landlords fail to provide that quality housing. So I'm glad that the DoD finally created that database called the Housing Feedback System last year. I'm sorry that service members had to wait 5 years for it. DoD needs to do better to rebuild trust with military families. Mr. Marks, if you are confirmed, it will be your job to make sure that service members and their families have, quote, safe, high quality, and affordable housing. So will you commit to preserving and using DoD's housing feedback system to hold private military housing contractors accountable?
Senator, thank you for that. And as someone who has been a military housing resident, I greatly appreciate the additional oversight to include that database which has been implemented. I've watched that roll out at the local installation level. If confirmed, you have my commitment. We will continue to build transparency and trust with our residents. We owe them that.
Good. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your strong response here. So while the reforms we've put in place are an important start, military families are still being treated like second-class citizens by unscrupulous landlords. At Fort Belvoir, the housing conditions in these private homes were so reprehensible that families couldn't even live there. But the families had to continue paying rent for their unlivable homes while they made do in temporary housing. Mr. Marks, do you agree that military families deserve the same tenant protections provided to their civilian neighbors? So, for example, the right to terminate their leases if their landlord fails to address safety hazards, or the right to sue their landlord for relief if their family got sick because of poor conditions in the home?
Senator, we owe our residents the highest standards of quality in homes, and to continue to make robust the both informal and formal dispute resolution processes. And if confirmed, I would want to work with you in this committee to see what we can do.
My question is, should our military families have the same rights that their civilian neighbors have to insist under local and state laws to get protection?
Senator, I understand there are some laws to include the Enclave Act that needs to be addressed. And so what I would want to do is, if confirmed, dig deeper to see how we could address that. I do believe that residents do need to have robust rights to include where they live.
Well, you know, we already have a pretty bad example here, because these families at Fort Belvoir tried to file claims under the Virginia Consumer and Housing Protection Laws, and their complaints were dismissed because of the Enclave Doctrine. This is the doctrine that says on federal lands, tenants may not be entitled to the same rights as other members of the state or community. I want to work with my colleagues to address this in the NDAA, but DOD also recently provided a response to a letter that I sent with Senators Ossoff and Kane that said the military services already have the authority to require private military housing companies to take corrective action and can negotiate to provide families with additional rights. So let me ask you, Mr. Marks, will you work with this committee and the military services to fight for and enforce military families' housing protection rights and ensure they receive the safe and quality, high quality housing they're entitled to?
Senator, if confirmed, you have my commitment to work with this committee, you and others and the services on behalf of our residents. We owe them that for the service that they give our great nation.
I appreciate that, and I hope this is something we'll take up in the NDAA. We have a duty to make sure that military families' homes are safe so they can stay focused on the mission of keeping the rest of us safe. And substandard housing conditions hurt military readiness. That's a problem we could fix. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hansel, currently there's discussions within the DoD about whether the NSA and the U.S. Cyber Command should be dual-hatted. Do you believe all of the prior reviews of this arrangement, including one just 3 years ago, that have found substantial benefits to that structure? Or do you feel that this should be reconsidered and an open question? What's your recommendation for the future arrangement of a dual-hatted arrangement?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Without being in the department and having the most current information, I can't make a full assessment, but I did testify on this 5 years ago. I'm very aware in the interceding time, how robust the capabilities at U.S. Cybercom have become and how the criticality of the cyber domain for our national security. I am very aware of all the lengthy amount of thought that has gone into this to date, the Dunford Commission and the current SSG implementation guide that Secretary Austin put in place, and would certainly leverage all thinking to date in any analysis. Although I don't have a specific recommendation on this, I do believe, just like in the private sector, that every organization, to include the defense, intelligence, and security enterprise, has to constantly assess itself to make sure it's aligned with the right tools, organizational structure to maximize effects. I would just note that I'm very aware of this committee's language, that any recommendation to change the dual hat comes with a need for both the secretary and the chairman to certify no degradation in operational capability to cybercom for our national security. And certainly, if confirmed and I conduct a review, would advise the secretary accordingly to that.
OUSD is one of the full-time participants of the DoD's cross-functional team for anomalous health incidents. A DoD Inspector General report from March 23 recommended a review and update any applicable counterintelligence guidance and policy documents to address AHI-related information and counterintelligence. To my knowledge, this has still not been completed. Will you commit to reviewing and implementing the recommendations of the DoD IG report?
I will, Senator. I think it is absolutely critical. I know firsthand the importance of taking care of those that are willing to put themselves on the line in the service of our country. And if confirmed, I would ensure that the Defense Intelligence Enterprise continues to make AHI a counterintelligence reportable event, so that we can determine any relatedness to foreign intelligence service activities.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews, Secretary Hegseth just took the unbelievable action of firing the Judge Advocates General of the military departments. These senior military lawyers were put in place to provide independent legal advice. The law currently states no officer or employee of the Department of Defense may interfere with the ability of a Judge Advocate General to give independent legal advice. I know Senator Reed asked you a similar question, and you said that you will follow the law and you will work to maintain independence. How are your JAGs supposed to feel about this, and how are you going to assure them that they will not be subject to political pressure?
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your work on military justice reform throughout the years. You know many JAGs, Senator. You know it's hard to control them because you came out with the special trial counsel concept and they opposed it. So when they have an issue, they will not hesitate to speak up, and they will. And it's been my experience that judge advocates and the Joint Force are willing to. They have options. They can leave government service. They can become lawyers at corporate law firms or corporations. So they're going to do the right. They're not in these jobs for money. So they're going to do the right thing regardless, Senator. So I think their moral fiber, their courage, they've been trained to choose the harder right over the easier wrong.
Well, we are counting on them to exert their independence and their legal acumen and to really strengthen the military justice system, which has not been working well. So it's on you to make sure they feel supported, to make sure they have the tools and resources they need, to make sure they don't feel that they are being politically bullied into certain outcomes. I'm also very concerned that Secretary Hegseth is considering downgrading the Judge Advocate General from 3 stars to 2 stars. I'm sure you're aware that we have 20 years of precedent that put that change in place so that they would have independence. Do you think this rank reduction is appropriate?
Senator, I think that this Congress gave the Secretary the discretion to determine what grade they serve at. As you well know, Senator, when Senator Graham led the fight to have the Judge Advocates General serve at the 09 level, it was required that they be at the 09 level. That was changed. We all have agreed that there's depending on, it's 2 top heavyweight stars. And so I think there's an overall assessment of the rank structure within the department at the headquarters of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. And so, it may be that other principal staff officers on the Army, Navy, and Air staffs also lose their grades. So I think the quality of the legal advice is not impacted by the grade that an officer serves at. When I joined the Army in the Judge Advocates General were 2 stars, and they gave frank advice. And commanders are always going to rely upon their judge advocates because they want to stay out of trouble. So they play a vital role at the commander at the 06 level. So I think that, rank's important, but more important is the quality of the legal advice that they're going to be issuing.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. We will be counting on you to bring a military justice system that is worthy of the sacrifice of our men and women who serve.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Matthews, you made a very frank and honest answer to that question, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Scott.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Well, first off, congratulations to each of you on your nominations. I think every one of you is going to do a great job. Let me start with Mr. Matthews. I've always had concerns about how much influence JAG officers have. Might be a little bit different than my colleague has just talked about, but in the combat, how, so we have people that are responsible for our men and women in uniform to lead them in battle. How much influence does it have a JAG officer on their, I understand the JAG officers give them legal advice, but ultimately they're not the decision maker. And just you keep hearing stories that the lawyers are running every time that we have to go, we put men and women in harm's way. If we're going to put men and women in harm's way, I want somebody that's a warfighter rather than a JAG officer to be the one that's making the final decision. So how does it actually work?
Thank you for the question, Senator. A couple of things. One, JAG officers are warfighters. We who wear the uniform, we're part of the joint force. We're soldiers. We want to destroy the enemy just like anybody else. But if the JAG officers are running the command, that's a command failure in my opinion, because we're advisors. We only advise. The commander, the policymaker should be making decisions. That would be as if the counsel to the senator is telling the senator what to do. That's not how it works. We can only advise. So that's my response, Senator.
So the tactical decisions are not made by JAG officers.
They should not be. Now, I will say, Senator, in 20 years of counterinsurgency and counterterrorism operations, we have had we have exercised a great deal of restraint and conduct of combat operations and lethal activities. And so the law of war is quite permissive, but the ROE, which is policy, not a legal requirement, has been quite restrictive, and that's impacted our ability to get after the enemy sometimes. We should always adhere to the law of war, of course, distinction, proportionality, military necessity, humanity. But I think we live in a risk-averse culture, and commanders are always concerned about getting relieved, about getting a 15-6 investigation where they killed somebody in a civ gas incident, and that's going to impact their ability to be promoted. And so that's an issue that I think you properly identify, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Hansel, in 2019, we experienced a tragic terrorist attack at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. After that tragic day, I fought hard as Florida's senator to get legislation passed to ensure we properly vet every foreign national, regardless of their country of origin or any partnerships we have with these countries. I was glad that we were able to make this, get this become law, but we have to remain vigilant. Can you discuss how we can continue to expand security on bases and protect the brave individuals of our military forces and their families?
Absolutely, Senator. Being from the Panhandle, very aware of the incident in your fight for the legislation after it, if confirmed, as part of my.
Because you know what was happening, it was the military wasn't deciding who was allowed on our base. The State Department was making the decision about who was allowed on our base, not the Department of Defense, which made no sense at all.
As I testified before, and I assume I will more today, it's these seams in government that we have to really be careful of. And I think after this legislation, though, it's very clear about the vetting requirements needed for military, for international military students. And I would say, as disturbed as I am about the status of our vetting, security clearance vetting capabilities in the department right now, there can be no exception about the application of them in securing our personnel. And I would just say, in addition to, since that incident, there's been new threats arising, and one that is of a concern of mine is this threat of UAS on our installations, and would certainly work with my colleagues in policy and the counter USX task force to best address that.
Thank you. Mr. Marks, constantly we get reports that our military is not ready to go to battle today. If something happened today, they're not ready to go to battle. So what are the things that you can do to make sure that our men and women are prepared?
Senator, I greatly appreciate that question. And one of the greatest ways that I believe that we can help our service members is to ensure that the places that they live and work are of a high enough standard and quality so that they're not distracted by the things that would take them from their mission preparedness to ensure that they're 100% ready to go do the work that they need to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, for holding this hearing. And I want to thank Congressman Williams for meeting with me last week. Thank you. I'm going to direct my questions to you, Congressman. The Nevada test site, now known as the Nevada National Security Site, NNSS, but we really still call it the test site in Nevada, so I'll defer to that. Well, it is larger than all NNSA sites combined. And to the ranking member, our sites, it's equivalent to the size of the state of Rhode Island. So, but
High tide or low tide?
we'll strike that from the record. There you go. Anyway, the Nevada test sites played a critical role in nuclear weapons development. It was ground zero for the majority of the United States explosive nuclear testing from 1951 to 1992, when 100 atmospheric and 828 underground tests were conducted. During this era, which we must not ever return to, millions of people and acres of land were contaminated by radiation. Since President George H.W. Bush signed the moratorium in 1992, the NNSA has utilized the Stockpile Stewardship Program in Nevada's underground laboratory to conduct subcritical experiments to certify the reliability, safety, and effectiveness of our nuclear stockpile. What we're doing in Nevada is working. For decades, the directors of the national laboratories, the commanders of U.S. Strategic Command, the secretaries of Defense and Energy, including through the entirety of the first Trump administration, have annually certified the military effectiveness of our stockpile. Nonetheless, some in President Trump's orbit have suggested that the U.S. should resume explosive nuclear testing. Can you imagine that? Despite no evidence supporting this position. And if it is above ground explosive testing, the amount of exposure and destruction would be felt worldwide. So in addition to placing Nevadans at risk, experts warn that breaking the moratorium would likely prompt Russia and China to follow, as they have more to gain from testing than we do, given our superior scientific and computer modeling capabilities. This could ignite a dangerous, deadly, and costly nuclear arms race for no reason. So, Congressman Williams, if President Trump were to ask your advice about returning to explosive nuclear tests, how would you counsel him on the national security implications, and what would you recommend?
Senator Rosen, thank you for that question. Thanks very much for hosting me and that conversation. It was very insightful and very much appreciated that. As you pointed out, we have 928 tests nuclear tests that we performed, more than any other nation. And we collected more data than anyone else. And it is precisely that data that has underpinned our scientific basis for confirming the stockpile since the moratorium in 1992. The decision whether to continue testing, critical testing, supercritical testing would certainly be above my pay grade should I be confirmed as the administrator.
Would you
of NSA.
recommend explosive nuclear testing in place of our subcritical testing that we do at the U1A tunnel effectively in all of these years?
And sorry, to get to my answer is I would not advise testing, and I think we should rely on the scientific information.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on this because resuming explosive testing at the Nevada National Security Site would risk severe economic and environmental impacts, not just in Nevada, but primarily in Nevada, placing more than 2 million people at risk who live in Las Vegas, and not to mention the downwinders states going east. We know that at least 32 accidental venting accidents occurred during the last period of underground testing. It's why there's strong statewide bipartisan opposition to testing, including from our Republican governor. So again, Congressman Williams, how would the risks of radiological release and groundwater contamination posed by underground nuclear testing, along with the risk to Las Vegas economy, feature in your advice to the president if he were even to indicate interest in resuming even below ground or any type of explosive nuclear testing?
Senator, thank you for the question. My primary concern would be for our deterrence, that we're deterring our enemies. The environmental impact, of course, would be very important and impactful to the citizens of Nevada. And I think before those kinds of activities were to take place, particularly so close to a populated area like Nevada, those would be very important considerations.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hansel, as Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, you would be responsible for the overall security of classified information. And recent reporting has highlighted that foreign governments are increasingly trying to exploit recently fired probationary federal employees for classified information. And as you know, some of those probationary employees have actually worked for DOD for some period of time. If they were promoted, they go to the probationary status. And our national security secrets are more at risk now because, this is my view on this, because of this administration's sledgehammer approach to our federal workforce. And this is not about the loyalty of our civilian service, but rather about the careless manner in which they were being fired. And while this isn't a new problem, this administration's actions have made it a bigger one. So already we were aware of an ongoing effort by the PRC to contact and recruit members of the U.S. military to learn how our military operates so effectively in certain areas. Certainly combat aviation is one of those. And we have an edge because of our training and our tactics and our long history, especially in combat aviation, but in other areas as well. We should not be making this information available to our adversaries. So last year I introduced a piece of legislation called the No Work with Adversaries Act with Senator Cotton to help try to tackle this problem. And I'm going to be introducing this legislation again next year. So if confirmed, Mr. Hansel, how do you plan to shore up our military's defenses and ensure service members and DOD civilians are alerted to the threat that's out there from the PRC and our adversaries?
I appreciate the question, Senator, and I'm certainly aware of the magnitude and breadth of TTPs and the agility of the TTPs being used by our adversaries, namely Chinese espionage in this situation, and specifically very aware of the legislation you've introduced regarding training of some of our fighter aircraft pilots. From outside in, not yet having been in the department, I would say is my hypothesis that most veterans and service members don't have any malice intent. I bet the bad apples are far and few between. And I think this is an example where we need to have clear guidance that's understood by service members and develop the tools that enable them to navigate the commercial space at a speed of relevance. I am very concerned about the department's ability in foci identification and mitigation along a slew of variables in the industrial base. But this would be a perfect example, reading the legislation about not only pass-through entities, but the amount of subsidy that triggers the legislation is something that I think we have a burden to provide the service members the tools to do the right thing, which I think is their natural instinct.
Yeah, I agree with you. Most service members do not have any intent to share information, though just the right person with the right knowledge can do significant damage to our national security. I think it's also important that everybody understands that the risk is out there and the PRC is actively trying to recruit. My understanding is there have been times where, folks think they're working for, one company and they're actually working for the PRC. So getting the information out there is incredibly important. So I hope you work with us on that.
Mr. Williams, recent efforts to eliminate federal workers and contractors could have significant consequences for NNSA's mission. So how do you assess the impact of potential workforce reductions on stockpile sustainment, non-proliferation, and modernization programs? And briefly, I don't want to go over my 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator, and thanks also for working with me on NEPA reform issues under the NDAA. I think it was a little over a year ago. If confirmed, I will speak up for the men and women of the NNSA and advocate for them. I think we know how critical they are to restoring our nuclear deterrence, our nuclear weapons enterprise. And so all of the discussions about personnel, we're rising to meet a historic demand right now. I think innovation is key to that. I think efficiency is key to that. But we need the specialized workforce that has been developed at NNSA.
All right, and I encourage you to push back against any further cuts to our NNSA workforce when it could undermine especially the nuclear security mission. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Senator Kelly. Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Matthews, to all the nominees, congratulations. Mr. Matthews, if confirmed, you will be the senior most lawyer in the Department of Defense, an incredibly important job. When the Secretary of Defense and the Commander-in-Chief want to employ and deploy the Department of Defense, it will come to you to decide whether the requests meet those legal standards. I'm concerned that Secretary Hegseth is looking to chart his own path on legal issues. As I understand it, in March, he brought in his personal lawyer, Timothy Parlatore, to oversee sweeping reforms of the JAG Corps, those thousands of military lawyers in the Department of Defense who meter out how military leaders are, or how military lawyers are trained and the decisions that they make. If confirmed, would you be Timothy Parlatore's boss, or would he be your boss? Can you turn on your mic for us?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Senator, President Trump nominated me to be the Chief Legal Officer of the Department of Defense. I will be the Chief Legal Officer of the Department of Defense and the Principal Staff Assistant to the Secretary on all legal matters.
So,
I'm not really, I've been reading newspaper articles about Mr. Parlatore, but I don't know him. I don't think he just became a judge advocate. So I'm not aware of these efforts, but I will be the Chief Legal Officer of the Department of Defense, Senator. I'm not an empty suit. I'm a serious guy, and I will speak up.
That's what we want. We want the Senate confirmed official to be the senior lawyer. I hope that Mr. Hegseth's personal lawyer doesn't start to employ sweeping reforms, given what the Secretary has already done with the JAG Corps. In that role, which we want you to serve in, you will be asked to meter out really big decisions for the Department of Defense. There are times when presidents and secretaries of defense ask for things that violate the Constitution, and you are standing in the breach, making those tough calls, as we discussed in our office. So can you just confirm for me that, and a couple of things, that if you are told that active duty military is being asked to come in to suppress nonviolent protests in violation of posse comitatus, will you determine and advocate that that not be a way the Department of Defense is employed?
Senator, I will advise on the law, and I will tell my clients what the law is.
Well, I think the law is pretty clear about active duty suppressing nonviolent protests in violation of posse comitatus. What about U.S. military holding U.S. citizens indefinitely without charge or access to courts? Will you push back on any attempt to use those unlawful powers?
Senator, you raised a hypothetical scenario, which is extraordinary. I'm not aware of that occurring today, or
I hope it never happens. We hope it never happens. But it's clearly illegal,
Senator.
Right? I mean,
I can imagine no situation where a U.S. citizen could be held indefinitely without any access to courts or due process. I don't see that, Senator.
Great. I hope you'll push back on that. What about if you're asked to punish military personnel for expressing lawful political views outside of their official duties? Would you advocate for military punishment in that case?
So Senator, the General Counsel of the Department of Defense, if I'm confirmed, we don't punish anybody. I'm a lawyer. I
We'll
provide
make a
legal advice.
recommendation, your recommendation.
So, and what's the scenario again, Senator?
That a member of the military expresses a lawful political view outside of their official duties.
I think lawful political views in the eye of the beholder, Senator. As you know, members of the joint force, of the armed forces have truncated First Amendment rights. So if they're making disparaging remarks about members of the Senate or of the Commander in Chief, that's an issue that we need to study.
If
So
in their private life, they express a view that they might consider voting for a Democrat, is that something you would recommend advocating some sort of reprimand for?
Senator, I don't have anything against Democrats. No, I'm not to be flippant, but no. It's a hypothetical, but I can't
Sure.
imagine a scenario like that, Senator.
Well, I mean, we see 4-star generals being fired because of their alleged views, right? We're seeing people remove JAGs, people I'm assuming you've served with for years, be removed for doing their jobs because they don't comport with the political views of the Secretary of Defense. So it's not a hypothetical to ask whether someone's going to be punished for their political views outside of work.
Senator, I haven't seen any evidence that the JAGs were removed because of political views. I've not seen that.
Okay.
Maybe you have access to stuff I haven't seen.
Well, I think can we agree it's highly unusual to remove that many JAGs at one? Have you ever seen in your career the removal of that many JAGs at one time?
Again, Senator,
Have you ever seen it? You've been there for a long time serving.
I have not seen it in my career, but I will tell you this, that one of those certificates general resigned before the administration even started. So we're talking about two people, Senator, and the actions taken by the secretary were lawful to my understanding.
I'm out of time, so I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Marks, in response to an advanced policy questions that was posed by SAC, you indicated that you would, quote, continue to aggressively address PFAS in a comprehensive manner across the department. I'm certainly glad to hear that, and certainly I am glad to hear because it's a top priority for me, particularly with a number of sites that we have in Michigan that need to be addressed. And I'm hopeful we can agree on some expectations. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions, and if you can just answer yes or no, this would be incredibly helpful when it comes to PFAS cleanup. First off, yes or no, would you be willing to remediate where PFAS exceeds federal or state standards?
Senator, I would adhere to the laws of the standards and we would remediate to those if confirmed.
Both federal and state?
Federal.
Great. Cleaning up to the extent that meets both federal and state PFAS standards to ensure PFAS safety?
And again, we want to clean up to the standards as indicated by law and policy.
And next, ensuring remediation is completed efficiently and effectively?
To the degree possible, absolutely, Senator.
And finally, improving transparency and engaging with community stakeholders throughout the process.
Senator, transparency is key, and yes, if confirmed, we would want to uphold that.
Great, and transparency is essential. One of the frustrations we've had is the communications in our local communities, and I would hope that would be different if you are confirmed.
Again, Senator, you have my commitment. If confirmed, we'll work hard on transparency.
Great, thank you. Mr. Hansel, congratulations on your nomination. I'm glad that we were able to meet in my office prior to this meeting and talk about priorities related to technology acquisition process in the intelligence community. As we discussed, if you recall, in my office, the bulk of new information technology development in the commercial sector is the DoD's traditional acquisition practices. And we think they need to be updated and streamlined to quickly adapt and to integrate to commercial technologies that are advancing a whole lot faster than we're seeing in the traditional sources. But this kind of change is particularly challenging for the IC community, given the needs for additional safeguards and classification. So my question for you, sir, is if confirmed, how will you work to speed up commercial technology adoption?
Senator, thank you for the question. It's very aware of it in my private sector experience. I've seen the challenges highlighted in the Forge Act as an advisor to DoD IC clients. I saw firsthand the opportunity costs of not enabling decisive action. And in advising private sector clients trying to do business in the intelligence community, the Defense Department, I saw the loss of effects of not being a good customer and not cutting the red tape. I agree with you. In areas with more classification, these problems are exacerbated. And I think we certainly, the first thing I would do is in line with the Forge Act, but I think we need to be more aggressive, is make sure there's not an overclassification. I've seen too many times where folks are using overclassification as a barrier to entry to deter competition. And that is not getting the best effects downrange for the warfighter. We have to stop that. Another example, the red tape is, when between an FCL accreditation, SCIF accreditation, security clearance backlog, when in the private sector, it sometimes is better to buy a company for accreditation than to go through the process. I think we can agree the process is extremely broken. And what I would do, I think top two things I would do is one, I think that there's an incredible amount of people out there that want to provide services to the intelligence community defense department, but don't understand the problems which exist because we've overclassified them. And so I would work to build bridge with leaders in the inside industry.
Right. Well, I look forward to working with you if confirmed on all of that.
Thank you, Senator.
There's a lot to do there. Mr. Williams, the National Nuclear Security Administration, which you have been nominated to head, is responsible for a lot of very big things, as you know. First and foremost, maintaining and enhancing the safety, security, and effectiveness of our nuclear stockpile. It's a big job. And yet we have Elon Musk and his Doge that have made, unfortunately, this agency a top target for staffing cuts, which to me, and I think many Americans believe is reckless. So, Mr. Williams, how can the National Nuclear Security Administration protect our most sensitive nuclear assets and meet its additional responsibilities without sufficient staff?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think, of course, I'm not in the department, so I'm not really familiar with what the plans are. I'm not familiar other than the news reports. However, I will commit to you that should I be confirmed, that I will be an advocate for the men and women of the NNSA. They comprise a unique workforce at a unique period of time when we have to meet the mission of reconstituting our nuclear weapons enterprise. So that's my commitment, Senator, that I'll be an advocate on behalf of the men and women of the NSA.
So I'm out of time, but just real quick, if confirmed, will you allow Doge to dictate staffing decisions in your agency if confirmed, or will you push back?
Senator, I'm not aware of how Doge operates, but the NNSA Act by Congress puts personnel issues under my authority should I be confirmed as the administrator, and I will be certain to protect and exercise that authority that's given by Congress.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Your Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all of the nominees this morning. Mr. Marks, the former Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire was one of the first places where PFAS was discovered after the base had been closed. It contaminated the water supply for the city of Portsmouth, and the Air Force was very responsive in coming and helping the city deal with that, putting carbon filters on the wells so that the water was cleaned up, and now they have been cleaning up the groundwater since then. So I was reassured to hear your responses to Senator Peters about your commitment on PFAS. But I am concerned with reports that I'm hearing from New Hampshire, from those people who are part of the Restoration Advisory Board, that DOD's travel policy restrictions are hindering public participation in community PFAS engagement meetings. So again, I was reassured when you committed to supporting community engagement on this issue, but do you agree that there is a responsibility to meet regularly with those restoration advisory boards, and if possible to do that in person where possible, so that it increases transparency and engagement with communities?
Senator, thank you for that. I'm unfamiliar directly with that part of the issue. However, partnership is exactly what needs to take place in communities to be successful. And so if confirmed, I would want to work with the services to better understand why they were not allowed to travel. I understand the orders that have come forth on that, but my understanding is also that mission can go forward. So I would like to dig deeper if confirmed to understand more, but it would be my encouragement to have those in-person meetings. I think they're the most effective methodology.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I agree. And I would just point out that because of the early recognition of PFAS contamination, PEAS was the site where the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which is now being cut, did a health study that is still ongoing. It's about to wrap up with, I think, about 9 sites around the country to determine the long-term health effects of PFAS. But for us in New Hampshire, the impact from the former Pease Air Force Base has been significant because there were 2 child care centers that were affected by the contamination, and parents were very concerned about what that impact will be long-term on their children. Mr. Matthews, I understand you were present in meetings at the Department of Defense on January 6th, and that you subsequently wrote a report outlining fallacies in previous testimonies to Congress. I appreciate that, but I'd like to know how you intend to ensure that all DoD attorneys provide legal advice that's free from political influence.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, I think that's the standard. That's the expectation, that they will be free from political influence. That's your job. And so I will reinforce that requirement throughout the department to the extent I can, as that, if confirmed, Senator.
And you are a member of the Army JAG Corps, is that correct?
I'm a reserve officer in the Army JAG Corps. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm sure you're aware that the Secretary of Defense fired the Army and Air Force JAGs at the beginning of May, starting at the beginning of May. A number of my colleagues on this panel have requested answers for why that happened. But do you have any knowledge of?
I wasn't at the department. I have no special insight, ma'am. I do know that my understanding was that Secretary Exep announced that the president will be accepting nominations for those positions, Air Force and Army and Navy Judge Advocate General, and that the incumbents for the Army and Air Force did resign after it was announced that nominations were being sought. But I have no insight into why that occurred.
But just to be clear, do you consider your job as a JAG officer to be political in any way?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
People in uniform should stay out of politics, ma'am. That's my view.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope that that's a value that the Department of Defense and Secretary Hegseth will continue to reinforce. Mr. Williams, I just want to follow up on Senator Peters' question about the firings at NNSA, because as he pointed out, there are fewer qualified, experienced personnel now who are safeguarding our nuclear weapons, that when the first firings happened at NNSA of 3,000 people who were deemed non-essential, that people had to be hired back because the firings were not targeted enough to recognize who was essential and who wasn't. So I would hope that if you are confirmed, that you would be very clear about what personnel are essential to ensuring that our nuclear stockpile is safe.
Senator Shaheen, thank you for that question. Thanks also for visiting the Air Force Research Lab in Rome, New York, where you and I were together a little over a year ago. So thanks for showing interest in the former Griffiths Air Base. I just wanted to tell you that.
I don't think that was me, Mr. Williams.
Was it not?
It was not.
I wish it had been. To answer your question, the mission of NSA is so critical right now in our national history. The workforce is absolutely critical to meeting the needs right now. If confirmed, I would work very carefully and closely to see what changes, if any, in personnel and scope would be necessary. Honestly, I would welcome analysis and evaluation of, are we innovating, are we spending money at NSA in the optimal way? But those decisions, as I've said, I will advocate for the men and women of NNSA and know that they have special skills and special experience that cannot be easily replicated.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
you.